wind power, we're pretty confident we can install that many wind turbines, there's space and so on, but it varies so much that sometimes you've got none, sometimes you've got a lot. So it needs to be managed. And we'll talk about energy storage a bit as one of the ways of managing that. But another way to manage it is by building a much larger transmission line to Quebec and to Newfoundland and Labrador so that it can be traded. So when there's extra wind power, you send it over the line, and when you need some back, you buy hydroelectricity. So that's kind of the scenario we came up with here. And also, we added a lot more solar. This is actually more than 10 times as much solar as we have now. But this is one of the things I love about these diagrams is it really gives you the reality check. There's hundreds of people installing solar on their buildings now. It's actually really moving in Nova Scotia, but it's so small to begin with that even once it's 10 times as big, it'll still be only putting in 2 petajoules out of 40. So this is what we kind of put as a scenario. But then what about part 2? You know, what about the electrification of transportation? And so very kind of, and here we're starting to get very back of the envelope. We're just, at this point, we're just running a spreadsheet with some numbers to say, well, what would that mean? And very roughly speaking, and this is super rough, like what I'm hoping is that we'll be able to do more detailed work to pin this number down more. But roughly speaking, 30 extra petajoules of electricity, we think should be well enough to supply all of the energy used in transportation. Putting aside, you know, how is that all going to work, and like, how are you going to get that many vehicles of all those kinds? But just looking at it in energy, that's a very large increase in the amount of electricity needed. And you can see it's been added here, this line to transport. So we just went back and said, well, okay, well then let's have more wind power and more imported hydroelectricity and double the amount of solar. Again, it's just kind of like, it's pretty kind of pie in the sky. Just have a scenario that supplies enough energy. So why did we create this scenario? Just to understand if this were to happen, what would the impact of that be on our greenhouse gas emissions and on all our energy system? And this is the result. A 46% reduction in the total input energy on the one side. So the energy coming in on the right drops dramatically, and that's because the coal-fired power, now the energy system that we're using is much more efficient in terms of its use of energy. The rejected energy is cut in half from 62% to 31%. And that's just simply because of the same reason. All those sources of energy have lower rejected energy. And very approximately, our greenhouse gas emissions would drop by about 75% from the 2017 levels. And interestingly, it came out about half and half. So right now it's about 16 megatons per year in Nova Scotia greenhouse gas emissions, about a 5 megaton drop due to eliminating coal and petcoke from electricity, and about a 5 megawatt drop from switching all the transport to electric. Now, I've said this before, to be clear, this has all got a lot of very tenuous assumptions behind it. And it's very approximate work. But I felt that it was a good thing for us to do, just to understand the scale of what we're talking about. And just to step back for a minute, this drop in emissions from 2 actions would basically meet the kind of goals that we're talking about in terms of the targets that are being talked about for 2050, let's say, to really address climate change. At the same time, it's very difficult to imagine how this transition would actually happen. Like the entire transport system running on electricity, that's a hard thing to imagine. Like when you think about like all those different kinds of vehicles, not just the personal vehicles, but the freight vehicles, very difficult to run on batteries, for example. So there's a lot of extra thinking that needs to go into this, but we just wanted to have a sense for what are the ramifications if we were to find a way to be able to do this. And that, challenges, we listed them out, and maybe in a discussion we'll be able to talk a little bit more about some of these challenges. But can we install that many wind turbines? Like, roughly speaking, wind turbines are bigger than they used to be. We've got 300 of them in Nova Scotia now. We're at about 600 megawatts of capacity. We're talking about 2,400 megawatts capacity, like approximately 1,000 more wind turbines. So a lot of questions like, do people want to see that many wind turbines? Are there enough appropriate sites? Do we have to start putting them offshore if we actually want that much wind energy? How do we manage all that variability? So we propose that you have a strong hydro connection so that you can trade it back and forth. But energy storage within the province is also something that I think will become important. How would we finance larger transmission lines to access hydroelectricity? Now that's probably an easier one, really. I mean, large transmission lines are built in various regions all the time. There's proposals now going around about, they call the Atlantic Loop. So that's a larger set of transmission lines connecting all of the provinces and states in this region, which would help solve a lot of this issue. How would we convert such a large portion of transportation to electric? That's a huge challenge. And, you know, are there other solutions that work better or cost less? I mean, this is just one idea kind of picked out of the air. Like, should we be increasing nuclear? Is tidal energy going to play a big role? Like, those things were a little bit more hypothetical to us, so we didn't really include them. Or to what extent can we reduce this number of energy that we need and like continue on that pathway that we've been on? But that is kind of where we got to with it in a student project that I found quite interesting to be helping with. And I think we're doing reasonably well for time. So I'm just going to say a couple of things. So one is, certainly you can only go so far with this on a spreadsheet before you start needing a more sophisticated energy modeling approach. And luckily for us and for everyone, the OERA, which is an organization you may know, is Offshore Energy Research Association. They've really branched out a lot into like renewable energy research and so on. They have a project supported by various governments called the Atlantic Canada Energy System Modeling Project. And I have the privilege of being part of the technical advisory board for that project. And what the project is doing, the team is doing, is building an open source energy system model. So what that is essentially a big piece of software that you can put in different parameters and different changes. And it will evaluate how much energy is needed, what the cost will be, how much natural gas, how much coal, like all of those things can be evaluated in a much more sophisticated way. So we're very excited to be, you know, participating in some way in that, and think it could be quite helpful. And if you're interested to learn more about that, the OERA produced a webinar about it. The link is here, which I presume that these will get shared somehow, that people can get them.
I'm posting them online.
There we go. So that encourages me that we're going to look more deeply into this, because it definitely needs a deeper look. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about is just energy storage, because we're finding that that is a huge and rising topic, and it has the potential to be helpful in this situation. Anything that energy can be stored in. So I've talked about thermal energy storage, so we don't need to talk more about that. Batteries installed at buildings, that is happening. We've also done another project where we studied the electrical bills from 6,000 commercial buildings to try to figure out which ones could most make use of a battery at their building. So what would people use a battery at? Like, say you've got a commercial building, a factory or store or so on, or an office, and healthcare facility, like there's all sorts of places you can imagine. And you've got a fairly large battery that you've now installed there. That has some interesting benefits. It can help provide immediate or short-term backup power when there's a disruption on the grid. But also on any given day, that battery can be deployed to, you can charge it when there's low cost electricity, and then use it to cut your peak demand, to reduce your peak demand charge. And that's true of the whole electricity network as well. So what we envision here is, say 1,000 of these, or even 100 of these commercial buildings have a significant size battery, and that use of that battery is controlled by an arrangement between the building owner and the electric utility to provide these services to the electrical grid. And related to that, and this is something that we're involved in, electric vehicles are now starting to have the capability, and the charging equipment is coming to be able to move the electricity in both directions. So not only taking electricity to charge the car, but at times when it's needed, taking some electricity from the battery in the car and putting it into the building or the system. So it's bidirectional charging. And what I did was a little, again, I kind of love these back of the envelope calculations, just give you a sense for, okay, what would that mean? There are approximately 600,000 light duty vehicles in Nova Scotia. So that's cars, trucks, the kinds of vehicles that are already beginning to be available as electric. So if you imagine a future scenario where half of them were electric, and then we're just guessing in terms of these parameters, but say 20% of those had let's say an agreement in place that some of that capacity in the battery can be used for grid services, and that those are plugged in 50% of the time. If that was the case, you'd have about 600 megawatts of power available from those batteries that are for those cars that are sitting there. That's a lot. That's a significant power plant in Nova Scotia. And it would have enough energy in it to roughly run 600 megawatts for 4 hours. That's very significant in terms of like an energy storage system. And what's interesting is the dual purpose of that system. So if you look at it from an individual building owner's perspective, even down to an individual homeowner, if I'm going to go buy a battery to install in my house, that could be a good thing. I could consider that a good investment, especially if I get frequent power outages, because then, you know, it could keep your freezer running, your internet running, etc., things that you value. And I could potentially in the future, when there's a setup for that, I could use it to provide grid services, and the utility would pay me a little bit for that service. But if I'm anyway considering getting an electric car, a typical electric car has a battery at least 3 times the size that you would normally install in your home. So you've got much more capacity in the car. And if you're buying the car anyway, you've got this battery sitting there that whenever it's plugged in could potentially be of some other use. So there's definitely a strong argument for making these additional uses of electric vehicle batteries. And then we won't have time to talk about this too much today unless people want to in the discussion, but hydrogen gas, H2, is as an energy storage medium, is becoming another topic. It was actually, many people may know, was talked about a great deal some time ago, a couple of decades ago, but discussion about it is coming back. And again, we won't have too much time to talk about that unless people want to talk about it in a discussion. But people are coming, well, firstly, there's been a whole group set up called the Atlantic Canada Hydrogen Alliance, which launched a couple of weeks ago. So that's one source you could take a look at sort of what people are thinking in terms of advancing hydrogen as an energy storage and carrier. But we're also seeing in our lab companies coming to us with hydrogen electrolysis kind of proposals that maybe we could work on together and so on. And I'm very near to the end of my talk here, but just to say that we're very excited to be part of the first test station of bidirectional electric vehicle charging in Atlantic Canada, and it's pictured there. And this is Rebecca Costello, who was an engineer at Nova Scotia Power. Nova Scotia Power and the province are partners in this project. And that is an electric vehicle. It happens to be a Nissan Leaf. And it's being plugged in through the DC fast charge port. And that is actually a fairly fast charger. Like even if you were just going to plug the car into charge there, it's a 30 kilowatt charger. So it would charge this car in about an hour, depending on how empty it was. But it has the bidirectional capability. And we were excited a couple months ago to show that, yes, we've got it working. We can take that energy from that car and put it into the adjacent building and measure that, which you don't see. The building's behind here. It's also been a really good learning exercise. It's a fairly big building it's connected to. So, I mean, obvious enough, but we're finding it difficult to make much of a dent in the demand charge of this building using just a car. But there are smaller ones that you can install at your house that are coming onto the market. Smaller, I mean, bidirectional chargers. And we're going to test 2 of those at other NSCC campuses. So excited to be involved in that. And I'm just going to come to very, very brief conclusion by saying that we are certainly on our way in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to clean, low carbon electricity. We absolutely have a long way to go. I think the Sankey diagram we prepared really shows that. And a significant part of how we get there could be clean electricity supplying electric transport. I think that's all that I wanted to say, other than thank you, and open it up for questions.
Thank you.